In our previous video, we saw how the ancient Romans used crucifixion as their most cruel form of punishment. Now we take a look at ancient China and the most brutal punishment you will ever see. Lingchi, one of the most feared punishments in history. Used in Imperial China, not just to kill, but to shame, erase, and terrorize. Lingchi, often translated as death by 1,000 cuts, was one of the most feared execution methods in Chinese history. It was officially codified during the Tang dynasty, but likely used in earlier forms even before that. Over centuries, it became a state-sanctioned punishment, lasting through the Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties, until it was formally abolished in 1905 as part of legal reforms under the last Qing emperor, Puyi. Lingchi was never a common punishment. It was reserved for what imperial law considered the most heinous crimes. High treason, parricide, which is the killing of one's parent, and crimes against the emperor himself. Under the Great Qing legal code, it was the maximum penalty, worse than beheading, worse than hanging, because it targeted not just the body but the soul. In Confucian tradition and broader Chinese spiritual belief, maintaining the integrity of the body after death was vital. A mutilated corpse meant an unsettled spirit, denied proper burial, denied peace in the afterlife, and cursed to wander. Lingchi ripped that hope away, slice by slice. Executioners were even trained to keep the victim alive through dozens of cuts, sometimes over 100, before finally ending their life. And even after death, the ritual continued, with more cuts made to complete the sentence. The condemned was led into a public square, often outside a city gate or near a busy market, places where maximum spectatorship was guaranteed. There, they were stripped, bound to a wooden frame or cross-like scaffold, and displayed to the crowd. The location wasn't accidental. Just like Roman crucifixions, Lingchi was a spectacle of power, designed to humiliate the criminal and terrify the public. The executioner, often a state-appointed specialist, trained specifically in this gruesome task, would begin with carefully placed incisions. Not random slashes, but deliberate ritualized cuts to areas like the chest, arms, thighs, and shoulders. These early wounds were shallow, avoiding arteries or vital organs. Their purpose, pain, not death. In some dynasties, particularly during the Ming 1368 to 1644 and Qing 1644 to 1912 periods, legal records described how the executioner was required to follow a set sequence of cuts, sometimes exactly 100 or 120 incisions, before delivering the fatal blow. The condemned was expected to remain conscious through dozens of these, enduring agony as flesh was stripped away bit by bit. Only after the performance of suffering was complete would the final, fatal cut be made, often to the heart or neck. But the ritual didn't end there. In many cases, additional post-mortem cuts were carried out. Lingchi wasn't reserved for petty criminals. It was inflicted on those seen as the greatest threats to the imperial order: traitors, rebels, and those who dared to challenge the emperor's rule. Take Cao Jishang, the important eunuch serving under Emperor Yingzong of Ming, put to death by Lingchi in 1461 for leading an army in rebellion. Also, Liu Jin, a powerful eunuch during the Ming dynasty, who was once one of the most influential men in the empire. He amassed enormous wealth and controlled the imperial secret police. But in 1510, he fell from favor. Charged with treason, corruption, and conspiracy, he was condemned to Lingchi. Witnesses said it took over 3,000 cuts to end his life, and parts of his flesh were sold to the angry crowd for coins. By the late 19th century, as China faced growing foreign influence and internal upheaval, Western diplomats, missionaries, and reformers began to sharply criticize Lingchi as a symbol of imperial cruelty. Accounts from observers like George Ernest Morrison, an Australian correspondent in Peking, and French military officers who famously photographed the 1905 execution of Fuzhinnie, sparked international outrage. These images and reports portrayed China as backward and brutal, a narrative the Qing government could no longer afford during its push toward modernization. At the same time, internal reformers like Kang Youwei and Liang Qichao were pressuring the Qing court to abandon archaic punishments. As part of the late Qing legal reforms, which aimed to align Chinese law with Western standards, the dynasty officially abolished Lingchi in 1905. It was one of many efforts to modernize under the rule of the Guangxu emperor, though many of these changes came too late to save the faltering regime. But Lingchi didn't vanish with its legal repeal. Its legacy bled into Chinese literature, art, and collective memory. In modern Chinese fiction, the image of a body cut to pieces became a metaphor for national disintegration, especially during the humiliations of the Republican era and the Sino-Japanese War. The idea of 1,000 cuts, Lingchi Hua, came to represent suffering under unchecked power, foreign domination, or political betrayal. Today, Lingchi is remembered not only as a historical punishment, but as a symbol of suffering, fragmentation, and the terrifying consequences of absolute control. What do you think of Lingchi? Is it worse than crucifixion? Share your thoughts in the comments.